Shipwrecks attract divers for many reasons. Some search for treasure, some search for adventure, and some search for the key that will unlock the mysteries of their past. The CSS Richmond has been resting on the muddy bottom of the James River over 150 years for her story to be told. This summer, Bill Waldrop and Mike Nussbaum hope to tell part of her story. What is so special about this shipwreck?
Well, the CSS Richmond was the sister ship to the Merrimack. Everybody knows of the Monitor and the Merrimack. They've not heard too much about other ironclads, but the Richmond was being built in the same shipyard, Gosport Navy Yard in Portsmouth, Virginia, from the keel up. At the same time, the Merrimack was being converted from a ship that burnt to the waterline to an ironclad. So it was the second ironclad built in the state of Virginia. Another thing, the Richmond defended the capital at Richmond from invasion by the Union Navy from July of 1862 till she was scuttled and sunk on the night of April 2nd, 1865, which pretty much makes her the longest serving ironclad in the Confederate Navy. When she was brought to Richmond, she wasn't exactly finished, but she was finished. Her armor plating applied, engines, munitions, everything else was completed at Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond. So there's other than the name, a real connection to the city of Richmond.
Yes, there are ironclads in Charleston Harbor. There are ironclads in Savannah, Georgia, but they're not this ironclad. Many of those ironclads never fired a shot in anger, at least if they're Confederate. The treasure to me is being on something that only a handful of men have been on since it was scuttled in 1865. And we don't even know much about that. To unlock what actually happened to the Richmond, we have no idea. It was almost an accident that Clive Cussler even found what he believed was the wreckage of the Richmond, and that Dr. Gordon Watts from East Carolina University came up here using his data and then found what we believe is the Richmond. He wouldn't even say it was the Richmond, but we now know it is. 8 men, maybe in 100 years, up to that point, had ever been on this wreckage. And even then they didn't know what it was. So every dive we make is a treasure dive. The treasure being the mystery, unlocking the mystery of what actually happened to the Richmond and what it was actually like. One of the coolest things ever happened to me is the year it scoured out the inside edge of the casemate. As a diver, I lay down in that scoured out area, and I could honestly tell people I was probably the first man since 1865 to be inside the Richmond.
Is it possible to have a negative visibility? Well, the ship is about 160 feet long and about 40 feet wide at its widest, somewhere in there. It's laying across the channel at about a 45-degree angle. We don't know which end is the bow, which is the stern, because it is covered with so much sand and mud. It's upside down, which is good. There's so much more of it preserved. The wooden hull that would have been what was under the water, since it was turned right side up, was blasted all away when it was salvaged. But that armor plating and the casemate is under the mud. The edges are exposed on one side. There were a lot of salvage attempts over the years that altered its condition. There was some stuff taken off, and right after the war ended, within the first year, just by people hoping to grab something of value and go. In 1870, the government realized they needed to clear these obstructions to navigation up to the port city of Richmond. So they started letting contracts. A contractor named Peter C. Asserson came in 1871, and during that summer, he's the one that did the bulk of the salvage on that wreck. Clive Cussler came up here in the 1980s, and relocated the CSS Richmond, but they only had 1 day left to spend on the Richmond. Beyond that, 1993, Gordon Watts mapped it, did an investigation of it for the Corps of Engineers, who were considering deepening the channel through there. So pretty thorough report for the amount of time he had to spend on it. And beyond that, I don't think there was anything until Mike started in 2010 and this project began. What I hope to do today is to go down and ascertain the condition of the wreck. We've had 3 floods since we were out here on April 12th doing the sector scan. At that time it looked like a lot was exposed. I dove the next day, it was. And so now, here June 23rd, I'm going down to see what the condition of it is since then. So, let's see. I need you to hand me the shovel.
Okay.
I got to dig myself out of the bottom. All right, what's the signal if barge traffic's coming? 3, continuous sets of 3 tells me get your butt up now. If I hear 4 bangs, you're telling me go to shore. Now, if I want to read my gauges underwater, I've got this high-tech device I do that with in this kind of visibility. You want to see it?
Sure.
It's a ball jar full of clear water. That's about the only way you can do it when it's like this.
Bill will follow a predetermined course to a position on the wreck. Once Bill reaches his position, he will send a marker to the surface, to which I will secure the boat. At that point, I will assume the duties of surface watch and diver support.
Had it not been for my glass ball jar, I would have not known what I had at all. Lots of debris, which is not unusual. We usually have to clean it off every time we come out here. I think it's worse. And in some places it's like sand dunes right over top where it has been uncovered in the past. So just take a lot of cleanup. Where I probed down the hatchway last year, I can feel some of the pipes coming up. So, you know, it'll take some work to clear it off, but it's doable, I think. I don't know how. I got to the downriver end of the hatchway, so what it does upriver, I don't know. But yeah, it's those 3 floods we've had didn't do us any favors by a long shot. I think when I came out here in April, right after the survey, and just what I saw, it looked to me like it had scoured it out. Nope, nothing easy about this one. Go ahead and pull us over to the shore there. Which way is the storm going? Could you tell? Do you see it developing from up there? It's coming, isn't it? Yeah. You know what the rule is? If you can see it, it's too late. Need your help? Can't get a break this year. Look how much that thing has grown since I come up. In April of 2018, this past April, Brian Abbott and Dave Thompson of Nautilus Marine Group volunteered to come down here and do a sector scan of the wrecks at Yorktown for John Broadwater, who had ran that project back in the early 80s. And they also heard about the CSS Richmond, so they volunteered to come up there for one day and do a sector scan. They scanned the Richmond on April 12th, and the imagery showed us a whole lot of things that we weren't able to see beyond the 6 to 12 inches we could see at a time. So put it all into a new perspective for us.
Here. So this appears to be the wreck right here. What you see over here is the bottom, but over here you can probably see a change in the bottom material. This is probably more sand. This is more clays and silts and so forth.
The water was clearer than I had ever seen it, but unfortunately fish are spawning in the James. That'd be like having rain on your windshield. You can't see clearly through it. But we did, even so, we did get some good images. So we were really lucky to have them come and do this for no charge.
And you're thinking this is just, could this be the bank just coming up, going up the side, shallowing?
Oh, it's to the east, so yeah, it could be. We got a real short range here, 45 feet. I'm going to run it down one more shorter range just so you can see some better detail. But then I'll run it back out because I'd be able to identify a lot. I mean, you've got like, you know, hard returns right here, you know. But
and you can overlay all this so that we can see a larger picture.
I'm hoping, yeah. If you look here, I've got tons of metal, looks like debris all over the place down here. Lots of angles and shit. So, like right here, that looks, you know, that piece right there.
Yeah.
You see angles here, circles there, here. So what I would do is I would come back and we would start upstream and just go all the way across, all the way back, and do like 5 drops across and just start kind of like mowing the grass, but pick it up and just scan like 500 feet, 600 feet of stretch of river where all those boats are laid out. And that's what I'd recommend that we do next time we come up, is just start in a place, shoot it all the way across, move over 100 feet, come all the way back.
The difference between the sector scan and side scan is the quality of the view that you're looking at. With side scan, it's like your bottom profiler, depth finder. What you're seeing when you look at it is an image captured from sonic waves being projected out the side. And it's from a fish-like device that doesn't shoot straight down. So any side scan imagery you're looking at, there's going to be a line down the center of it because it's not capturing anything there. And what it does capture, if there were a ship on the bottom, it would look like the shadow. If you held the light on it, the shadow, what you're seeing is the shadow cast by the features as they come up away from the bottom and down. But with a sector scanner, it's within a tripod that's lowered to the bottom. It rotates in a circular fashion, it's sending out these sonic waves. And when you look at the imagery on a laptop, it's like watching a radar screen. The feature on the bottom slowly appears as it makes that circle. And it does it from as close to a 20-foot diameter to a 300-foot diameter. And the difference is, with a sector scanner, it's like looking at the object. It's an amazing piece of equipment, and you can really pick out the details of whatever is down there.
Day 2, Bill hopes to remove some of the debris. Today, Mike will be working with us on the wreck. How did these two meet, and how did they find this shipwreck?
It was destiny. I was investigating the site, and the key salver in this area was a fellow by the name of Benjamin Malafert. So after I ran out of normal research option, I began looking for Benjamin Malafert. And through a series of coincidental intercepts, I ended up talking to a fellow in Dahlonega, Georgia. And he knew a fella up here in Richmond who was a semi-professional diver who was also interested in Malafert. And he married me up with Bill Waldrop.
For me, this project began in 2012. I was contacted via email from a gentleman named Mike Nussbaum, who had been exploring the CSS Richmond since 2010. And he was looking for somebody to join him that was familiar with zero-vis diving. And I'd been doing that for 40-some years at that point. So he contacts me out of the blue. I don't know him. And so I was curious, you're diving to look for the CSS Richmond. Why? Were you looking for artifacts? Because if that's the case, this is a federally protected wreck, and I wasn't about to do anything like that. And he says, oh no, he laughed. He says, no, that's not it at all. He says, I just think it's a historic wreck. And, you know, the Monitor gets all the money and the attention. Millions have been spent on the Monitor. And it's a shame that we have an ironclad right here in 35 feet of water, just a couple hundred feet offshore, whereas the Monitor is 16 miles offshore and over 200 feet of water. And it's just a real shame that nothing is being done on a Confederate ship that would have been the sister to the Merrimack. When he told me that, I was hooked.
And the first time I met Bill Waldrop, other than on the internet, was at 4 o'clock on July the 23rd, 2012. And it was an interesting occasion. We drove out here. I had a map with GPS coordinates and all that sort of stuff, none of which was anywhere near close. And Bill said, well, I notice on your sketch map here you've got 3 houses. He said, why don't we just drag and see what we can find out? And I said, it'll never work. There's tree trunks, there's stumps, there's blah, 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 blah. I gave him all sorts of reasons it wouldn't work. And the very first drag, we hooked on something.
He had brought along a 1993 report that Gordon Watts had done for the Corps of Engineers that showed the position of the wreck in relation to certain features on shore. Well, I'm sitting there holding that, looking at it, and I realized that the best way to do this would be the way they did it back in the 1800s, drag a grapple across that vicinity. So we got ready, we dropped the grapple, and as I was going across it, looking at my bottom profiler, I saw this mound of stuff, and I said, drop the anchor, drop the grapple. He did, and next thing I know, he was holding on to the other end of the rope. It nearly pulled him out of the chair when the grapple snagged. So we knew we'd hung on something. And then I went down. I'm going along the bottom, following the line, and all of a sudden, other than a few planks and pieces of logs or whatnot, all of a sudden I hit something hard with my elbow. I reached over, and there's this cylinder standing straight up with rivets all over it, and I realized I was looking at the smokestack. And I was so excited, you know, after I got over that and I went around and checked it out, I rubbed my hands all over it.
And he came up an hour and 15 minutes later. And I said, how'd it go? And he held up his hands, and they were rust colored. And he said, Mike, we must be the luckiest mans on the face of the earth.
He's sitting in the boat right close to me, and he says, did you find anything? And I held my hands up and I says, what does it look like, Mike? I thought the man was going to do a backflip off of my boat. He was so ecstatic.
And that was 7 o'clock, 23rd of July, 2012. At 7:29, I touched the side of the pipe of the Richmond, and the rest is history.
Yeah, Alan, you're on the Julianne, you say? Yeah, this is Diver Bill. We're down here between channel marker 158 and 160. Eric might have told you we were here, but I'm just wondering, I know y'all are up there at Luck Stone loading up. When do you anticipate coming down this way?
Boat traffic can be heavy on the James River. Each day, Bill checks with his marine resources before diving, and emergency SOPs are reviewed. There are some difficulties and dangers when diving on this wreck.
There are a lot of challenges that we face. Some of them are, well, there's a certain amount of apathy from the state and maybe the federal government, lack of funding for the things that really need to take place out there. We don't have any financial support from anyone, and there's some equipment that we need for safety's sake, if nothing else. Comms, communications. We need to be able to be in contact with the surface and the surface to us, just to be as safe as we can. Barge traffic coming up and down the river, we have to stay on top of that. The last thing you want is to be jumped by a tugboat coming around the bend, and there's a bend above and below us. We can't see them until they're closer than they ought to be. And so we need to know as soon as possible that they're in the area.
But if you don't know what you're doing, there are any number of pitfalls you can find. First is that I've been diving since '67, and our second or third dive out here, I had to pull barbed wire off the wreck. There are very sharp twigs, logs, there are nails, there are all sorts of things on the bottom of this river that can cause the inexperienced diver all sorts of distress. You can get hung up on many things, which can cause panic.
The visibility. Visibility is a big problem. Sometimes you can see as much as 2 to 3 feet when the temperature is cold and there's just a little bit of rainfall, but typically anywhere from 3 inches to 6 or 8. So the visibility really is a problem.
It's a matter of simple safety, but the James is a very dark place. And you add to that the various things that you can bump into in the darkness, and it can be a dangerous place to be.
Boaters, even with the boater safety course, and I think by now, since 2016, everybody should know what a diver's flag is, but if you do this, you realize that you think that boaters believe that it means circle here for hours. Or these water roaches, they seem to think that a dive flag is a pylon for them as they race one another. And two, preparation. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this. One day of diving is about 3 days of work for me, because you have to get all your gear together. If you're changing operations on what you're doing, then you have to change some things, modify them, so forth. So one day to load up and get ready, one day to do the dive, and the third day is cleaning up all your stuff, putting everything away, getting your tanks filled, and beyond that, because you're taking notes and whatnot, you have to do a report on your dive, what you did, what you discovered, and if there's new dimensions to be added to the drawing, you have to do that. So very time consuming. So I'm going down with fire hose and that choker nozzle on it. I'll be coupling up, having my line, and when you see me pull it 3 times, time to fire it up. Now we're going to fire it up before we go down, because think about it, you got air from that pump to the water level, right? You got to push that air out the end. We'll do that. We'll run it before I even go down, okay? It runs differently when it's pumping water. You'll hear it, roar, the motor bogs down, right?
So if I'm left, you know, I will figure that if they drop the line, there's a reason. I'm headed for shore. Okay.
Okay.
If you give me the bangs, I'm coming up. All right.
Today's dive operations begin. As Bill starts his dive, we post all permits for today's operations.
On the casemate side, I believe we got a point where we can dig down. It's going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of work. One day, something's going to break. Me, the ladder, or the pontoon boat.
On this next dive, all hoses will be connected to the pump and a test run will be performed on the wreck.
And this is ready for coupling up. Be in the up position. Okay?
I know. I just put that up.
Yeah. I'll hold the weight for you.
All right.
Push them down. Are there clips on that one? No. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, guess what? The sand is caving back in as I go down with it.
Okay.
So I spent the first part of what I was doing just blowing, looking for a place to blow and dig that crap out of the way. It's doable, but you can use this to loosen it up, but that bucket to pull it out the hole is what you got to do, okay? With blowing, all right?
Now,
you're gonna have to use both methods.
if you went down the outside of the casemate with that, would you have the same problem?
Yeah, because once you're down in a hole, you're blowing sand up and it settles right back.
No.
The high point, you can shave a high point down. I mean, you better be ready when you got that thing blowing. You better have a rope or something you can hang on to, because it's gonna just, you see firemen when they're using it. I mean, you got to be braced against that thrust, because that's what it is. Action is opposite equal reaction. We're mowing the lawn back and forth all day long. He'll be watching and he'll go, "Whoa, look here, there's something here."
After lunch, we resume operations.
I think I put my hand on the underside of the gun deck.
Did you get a feel for how big the beam was?
No, I mean, it seems to be this wide. It's gonna take much more digging and clearing. And down there, it probably looks like a bomb went off with sticks and crap everywhere. So, yeah, when I find that what's left of the dead rise and the deck and the casemate, then it's like, oh yeah. So, yeah, it's gonna have to take a bigger hole, but at least I put my hand on it, and it sure seems like it to me. It won't no log. It was square cut. So, pretty exciting. At one point, I was 5 feet. I had that pipe. Now, I'm on my knees at the bottom of that pit that I'm digging, throwing this way. And I got my head wedged up underneath of that thing, straight down, okay? Right. I mean, it's going, I wiggle it a little bit, and then boom, boom, boom. And so, you know, boom, boom, a little further. Go this way, boom, boom, and it's coming up. Yeah, see, this thing is angled across here like that. Every flood that's come along in here has packed stuff into there. Now, it erodes down it, and I guess that explains why, well, we've never seen it covered until 2017. And it was completely buried, all of that. So where we had to clear it out, everything that floated down the river packed in there, where we'd worked so hard to clear out.
Today's operations are secured, and we return to the landing. Well, Bill and Mike made some statements which basically says it all in regards to the difficulties we've experienced diving the Richmond this year. First, the weather has been a big factor. The rains and floods haven't helped us much. Second, the James can be a very, very dark place. Even in the best of conditions, all light filters out at 20 feet deep, and you're only halfway there. At 37 feet deep, I challenge anyone to find a blacker black. So with the rains and floods we've had this year, is it possible to have zero visibility, a negative visibility, or even a blacker shade of a blacker black? I'm guessing that 99.9% of the recreational divers would never consider diving the Richmond. I wouldn't, if I weren't helping Bill and Mike. But it is pretty cool considering that we are 3 of maybe 15 divers to touch the Richmond since 1865. I filmed the following 2 clips in the summer of 2016 and the summer of 2017, when the visibility was the best I have ever seen in the James. As we start our descent, we lose all light from the surface, and the water turns pitch black at 20 feet deep. On the bottom, evidence of the shipwreck is everywhere. There are many heavy beams with spikes protruding from them. Bill points out some of the armor plates beneath the beams that once supported them. Bill tells me to do a 180 so he can show me another section of the wreck. As we make our way back, we hear the high pitch of props cutting through the water on the surface. It serves as a reminder of the traffic above. He points down to a hook in one of the massive beams. Could it have once supported a sailor's hammock? Or perhaps a tool in the engine room? A permanently attached compass will help Bill map out this wreck. We come across a section of copper tubing. Is it possible that this once delivered steam to some of the equipment? As we move across the wreck, we discover many more steel plates. The smokestack appears in front of us, the same smokestack that Bill referred to when they located the wreck. The smokestack appears to have been double-walled. Inside of it, we discover a lot of debris, probably a collection of over a century and a half. As we continue our dive, we discover many more splice plates and bolts still holding heavy support washers in place. At the end of our dive, my curiosity gets the best of me. I want to see how dark it is without artificial light. The epitome of the term pitch black, the darkest water I have ever been in. As Bill approaches, I turn my light back on, and we head to the surface. As I make my descent down the line, I get distracted by the boats passing above on the surface. I suddenly bury my light into the silt on the bottom. The result? An unexpected blackout. Bill believes that Feature K was part of the reinforcing knuckle that was outboard of the hull. Like other sections of the wreckage, Feature K has many spikes protruding from it. These beams appear to be well preserved. Is it possible that these holes were the location where pins once held the armor in place? When moving along the bottom, caution must be used. As Mike has warned, there are many pointed items that could cause harm. On my way back to the anchor line, I encounter this little creature defending its turf. Both of us square off, but we decide to call it a draw and move on. I start my ascent, and as I break surface, Bill is patiently waiting.
All right, look like everything's secure. Let's go ahead and get out of here, Mike. Toss that line off. Topper, you get the one on the bow.
Bill, you think we ought to pull the truck out of the water first?
Nope. Oh, I love getting older. 10-4, you ain't coming up above there today, are you?
Not that I know of, no. We just want to be able to do a little work on the boat.
I've been under his boat many a time.
Day 6. This could be the last day of diving for Bill and Mike this summer. Bill's ultimate goal today is to gather some measurements that will confirm certain features of the wreck.
What are your goals for today? What do you want to do on this first dive?
Well, on this first dive, I mean, look at the muddy waters. It's been, what, 2-3 weeks? Almost 3 weeks?
Nothing new.
Yeah, because of all the rain and everything, we couldn't get back out here. So what has happened? I mean, you and I were so close to finding out, is that gun deck really below? And the deck that's exposed, the what would have been a lower deck, a berth deck. So we're so close. And so hopefully it hasn't filled back in the interim. If so, I'm going to ascertain whether we need to get down there and fill up the buckets and get that crap out of there any way we can to get the dimensions. So when I go down, that's what I'm going to do. What's going on? So from that point on, depending on what we have to do, is there more work required to get our dimensions? We're going to start getting dimensions. We're going to determine the angle of beam +1 in relation to the gun deck beam. Going to see what the distance is between them, and knowing the angles will help us help draw it. Okay, so that it makes sense, and accuracy is the main thing here. But if knowing that angle will tell us if the casemate in the gun deck beam is running as it should, or has it sagged, is it pulled up, has the casemate relaxed out, from all these years? Determine if I can put my hands on the beam decking, the decking that would have been the gun deck decking. Is that there? So, that's, and what appears to be the whale, the thicker boards that came up the dead rise, it seemed to me that it's leaned over. It should be more at a less degree than 90 degrees. And I want to determine, is it laid back? So I need to find the gap under it. So that's for starters.
Yeah, I'm going to leave the dimension taking up to you. You're the mechanical guy. What I want to try to do is to use your probes and go down the casemate side and see if I can determine how far out the casemate extends. Now, we may run out of probes that are the right length and have to come back with a hydraulic probe, and the odds are we won't get that done this season. But what I want to do, what I want to try to accomplish by that is, if we get to a corner, because the Richmond was unique from the two other ironclads in its dimensions and its angles, is if we could get to the corner of the wreckage, if they're still joined, then that will tell us that the sides haven't collapsed out during the salvage or over the 150 some odd years it's been down there.
The gun deck decking right where it meets the casemate is not there, as though it got busted out. So, that is a void going into the casemate.
Well, if it doesn't hook up to the side of the casemate, then we may be able to go down further, down the slope.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out. All right. So I think that's a plan. Ascertain what has happened since we were last here, and then do what we can to get some measurements.
Okay.
Bill performs a final check of his gear before he starts his recon dive to assess the condition of the water and the wreck.
All right, Mike, 10:54, put my time on a sheet. I'm going to go down and I'm going to look around and see what I can find out.
Okay,
so
Bill,
I'll see y'all later.
do you think having a light would be a big help?
Probably so.
Mike and I assume the surface watch and pass the time sharing stories of our favorite dives. Bill surfaces and the report is not good, but he is determined to gather the dimensions he needs to confirm certain features on the wreck.
Okay, so what this is, it will serve as a straight edge for me to determine the angle that what seems to be the gun deck beam is in relation to beam +1, which is exposed and has been exposed ever since we've been here.
One of the few items.
Yeah, and so I will, you notice I got 11'6", and when this board is 11'6" from the pillar plate, which is the center line of the wreck, then I can nail this to it. And my 14-foot mark on my tape line will line up with the 14-foot I got right here. And then I'll drive these nails in enough that it will hold this up against that, and then I can drop my plumb bob down to determine where the end of the gun deck beam is in relation to this.
Yeah.
What this is a template that I can fasten onto the gun deck beam, and I'll just go straight down onto the top of it and put a couple of little roofing nails in it to hold it on there. And because this is cut on an angle, when I put it on my drawing with the information I've got, this should go straight over and be at this angle on the casemate. Now there's a bunch of mud and stuff. I think I can get it out of the way, but that's going to be the challenge. And once I've got it down and slid over and can attach it here, if I've got contact here and here, and this is on the casemate right there, that would prove that the gun deck beam is at the correct angle to match what it would be going into the casemate as it was built.
On this next dive, Bill will ferry the tools he needs to the bottom.
I'll see you in 60 minutes.
All right. Hey, hold on. Will these come in handy?
Only if I plan on diving. Okay.
There you go.
Mike starts his first dive. He will be exploring a different section of the wreck. After surfacing, he explains some new features he has discovered.
Is that where it
That's
ties
the end
in?
point.
Okay.
Now,
That's a downriver beam.
right,
Mm-hmm.
there is a string that runs off at a 45-degree angle.
It's just been there?
No, it's been there all along, but it is so far underwater. Now, if you go off of that, it goes down, just like the slope here.
Mm-hmm.
It goes down, and I couldn't dig any further than about 30 inches before it just got covered up.
All right, topper, when I get in, give it about maybe 4 or 5 foot more scope right here. This is getting kind of tight with that current running out.
Bill and Mike continue their exploration of the wreck. Once both divers are back on the boat, Bill explains his discoveries to Mike.
It's tangent. Okay? So looking at it from above, this beam is technically 3/4 inches over from here because that board is running straight and true because it's nailed to this, right?
Yeah.
And now what I need to do is and I don't have much because of all that crud falling back in. Maybe I can push this on back, drop the plumb bob at another point. I'll have to dig down, and you saw those little aluminum strips?
Yes.
When you can't measure, what you do, you're in the dark, you push it up against there and you bend it up, and when you're satisfied that it is bent at that point, then you stand up and you measure it. Yeah.
Didn't we reach around under here and we can't find any planking?
No, and because it's filled in like it has, that ain't happening. I don't know, unless you came across here and used a hydraulic probe to go along it, but it is such a mess because it's filled in. I ain't kidding you, Mike. I mean, there's this much crap over top of what we had clean. Sticks, logs, trash, oil bottle, antifreeze bottle, and all kinds of drink bottles. It's unbelievable.
Bill prepares for the final dive of the day. He will attempt some video, but he isn't very optimistic.
Check your iPhone from time to time, Topper, and make sure there ain't no storm sneaking up on them.
Woo! How was it?
Oh.
Woo! How'd it go?
Oh man, I tell you, that was exciting. There you go. That's all the dimensions. Let me give you this too. Yeah. I mean, I think we can say this is the gun deck beam. It is under beam +1, and I was able to get all the dimensions. And the really cool thing, the planking is under it.
Okay, why don't you tell me more when you get into the boat?
Okay. All right. There's a lot to tell, but yeah, we're there.
Unfortunately, the water conditions were too poor for any video today. However, Bill was able to shoot some video on a previous dive of the section he has been working. The following video was shot in the absolute best conditions that the James River allowed this summer. Bill located one of the massive gun deck beams that once supported the Richmond's cannons. It appears that 1-inch pins were used to fasten these massive beams together. What was the purpose of this notch? Bill believes these beams supported the casemate of the Richmond. After returning to the landing, Bill shares his discoveries.
All right, in 2016, remember that we had uncovered, we had seen all of this,
Right.
and we got to thinking that this seems kind of small for a gun deck beam, which we thought we were on
It
the gun
wasn't
deck.
heavy enough.
Yeah. So nature that year scoured this out, and when we began our season, I literally fell down in here. Remember, I got caught in that chair. I fell down in here and I got to feeling around. And I'm like, well, this is the upturned edge of the casemate. So we went down here, and I think you continued digging down here further.
Right. Well, especially along the ledge here.
Yeah. And did you find anything beyond this?
Yeah, this is where we found the various bolts and dowels,
Uh-huh.
and we found remnants of another wooden frame
Yeah.
crossing at about 4 feet down,
Yeah.
and that's where we got seasoned out.
Yeah. So that season was interrupted. All right. Well, over the winter, I took what I knew about an ironclad that size, and I used what I knew: the position of this beam, okay, the angle of this, because I went to a great deal of trouble to get those dimensions.
Right.
Okay. The dotted line represents the hull that would have been there that was destroyed. And then I took drawings of a cutaway of an intact ironclad and drew it on here. This is so heavily built, I'm assuming and I believe that it's probably held to that shape. So that I thought, okay, well, the gun deck, the actual gun deck would have to be right in here, okay? So we just need to go down here. Unfortunately, 2017, we got completely buried.
Yeah.
There were several floods, and the mud line actually came right across here. All of this was covered completely.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, so we were
We just had to dig it out.
well, I hope for nature too.
Yeah.
There was nothing we can do, so we measured other things.
Now these beams here, do you figure those are iron beams?
Oh, these right here?
Yeah.
That's the way they had it shown.
Yeah.
What it is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so nature, the James River giveth and the James River taketh away. This year we had a couple of floods. The flow must have been just right, and so we found that it had once been scoured out, and even more so. And I think this is what you talking about, where you ended up.
Right. That was as far as I got.
Yes. So we got in here and dug out and washed out some more, and lo and behold, there was that gun deck beam. That thing is 11 inches by 14. And then over here you have some planking that's been knocked down, which it would be on the underside.
We've had fun finding that.
Yeah, and this waterway right in here, it's sitting right on it, as it should. So that pretty much matches what they have drawn here. And so size-wise, I'll show you the difference. This was the size of the largest beam, which is this one right here.
Right.
Okay? Well, you know, a 15,000 pound Brook triple banded
through that.
Brook cannon, I just didn't see that going. So when we uncovered this right here, the gun, which seems to be the gun deck beam, well,
It's right here.
that was this size, 14-inch wide, 11-inch deep. Now that's a gun deck beam.
That would probably hold the gun deck.
Yeah. So, pretty major discovery, I think, for this season.
That and the third plank.
Yeah. Yep. All three planks that were on the underside going right up to the waterway.
Yeah.
So, yeah. How much else? We probably running out of time once again.
Near the end of the summer, Bill decides to eliminate one of the difficulties he mentioned earlier.
And then when you finish, you put it right back on. Doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be there. So that part doesn't get scratched off.
I'm not worried about the out of the water part, it's the in the water part.
Yeah. How much, most of what we find, we run into.
Yeah, literally.
This is probably the most important thing, because if you don't get the mask on right, it's going to leak. So you loosen all your straps. And sit it on top of your head. Get it around your ears. And then just bring it down. Get this in the right spot. Just bring it down in front of your face. Everybody breathe okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, now, shut off. Really turn it back on when you don't get it in. On this side.
And slide it on up.
And slide it straight up.
Okay.
The class moves to the pool, and Jim runs Bill and Mike through some drills. Jim describes and demonstrates each drill. It's a continuous process. Each drill builds on previously learned skills. Bill and Mike are ready to use the new equipment on the Richmond. The two make one more dive to test the new gear. On this final dive, the James and the Richmond must have decided to reward them for their efforts this summer. This reward came in the form of several significant discoveries. This footage serves as an unattended sectional view of the casemate armor and wooden structure. It appears the layered armor plating was attached to the wooden structure of the casemate by 1-inch pins. Fortunately, this year the flooding of the James tended to wash out beneath some of the sections of the armor plating, exposing some of the pins. These pins appeared to be pulling out of the structure. It appears that the armor was attached in 3 layers. 2 of the layers were 2 inches thick, and 1 layer was 1 inch thick. There are sections where some of the layers appear to be missing. Could earlier salvage attempts have pulled these free? Could these be sawtooth markings on the edge of the armor plating? This piece caught Bill's curiosity, along with this pin located adjacent to it. Could it be part of the gun carriage pintle assembly? If so, could this massive cannon be lying just feet below it? It has been a challenging summer for these two, but they appear satisfied with the results of their efforts.
My goal would be that some small piece of the Richmond, before it disappears into the James, be brought up and displayed. And if I could accomplish that, I'd be a happy camper.
My goal is to stand on the south side of the James River, right beside the Lee Bridge, and look across that river at that beautiful hill. Tredegar Ironworks is to my right, and you have all that grassy area on that hill to the left. I'd like to see a reproduction of a CSS Richmond sitting on that hill so that all coming and going can see it. And down below, where you have all those old buildings from the Tredegar Iron Works, one of those buildings can have a museum filled with the artifacts from the CSS Richmond. I know that's a big dream, but I've often heard it said that if your dream don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough.
And so ends the summer of 2018. Let there be no doubt, these two will continue the pursuit of their goals in the summer of 2019.